Excellent. So thanks, Martin, for turning on the recording. And Bruce, we'll turn it over to you at this point. The floor is yours. Maybe folks can leave themselves muted until they know they have a question they'd like to ask. That would be great. Thanks.
Hey, Doug, I wasn't sure exactly what we wanted to do here, so I'm going to go through sort of why I'm running for select board and what my policy priorities would be. Is that sort of
That's
thing?
exactly right. That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, let me get started. I'm Bruce Evans, and I see many familiar faces and some new faces, so I'm glad to meet all of you. Thanks for the opportunity to come talk to you this morning. As you know, I'm a candidate for the select board. There are two very experienced members who are stepping down from the board this year, and I feel that my experience and my collaboration skills are a good fit with what's needed for a select board member. I've been a town meeting member for 11 years, and I've been on the finance committee for 12 years, the last 7 as secretary. So I'm the person who sits up stage and makes motions and occasionally gets them correct. And if not, the moderator lets me know where I've gone awry. But as a select board member, my policy priorities are fiscal sustainability. I'm a conservative financial person. I want to ensure that money is spent wisely. We do need to adhere to our financial management principles and make sure that we maintain a very high AAA bond rating that enables us to borrow at the most attractive possible rates. An example of this was for the Kennedy Middle School, where we were able to get a 20-year bond for 3%. Now, that seems a lot higher than what we get on our savings accounts right now, but it's actually for a 20-year bond is phenomenally low. So that's very important to us. The next area of emphasis is affordability. We want to keep Natick an affordable place to live by moderating the taxes, and I'll talk more about how we'll do that in a little bit. We also want to have a diverse mix of housing options for people. We don't want to just keep building single family homes and tear downs, and we want to emphasize work towards achieving the Natick 2030 plus plan. So more open space, more multi-unit housing, so that there's something for everyone. Next is transparency. We want to make the activities of the government more visible to people. It's very difficult for people to get information that they need as residents or as businesses, and we need to streamline that process. We need to take steps to improve both the digital communications and the analog communications, things like information that goes out in your water bill, or information that went out in your electric bill that says, here are the different options you can have and the different rates associated with them. Those types of things. And we want to do that not only for residents, but also renters. A lot of the property owners, they may get their heat paid for, but their electric is usually something they make a decision on. So we'd like to give them the opportunity to capitalize on that. The next is a thriving economy. This is critically important to help keep the residential tax burden down. About 20% of the tax revenues come from commercial businesses, and they help fund many services without increasing school enrollment. So they're a real plus to us, and we need to get a dynamic mix of businesses and be able to attract and retain those businesses to improve the quality of life and to increase employment, quite honestly, in Natick. Next is town services. And by that, I mean making sure that the town administration has the tools to attract and retain the talent that they need to deliver these services. One of the issues that we have in this region is it's a very competitive region in terms of opportunities for people who can serve in various administrative roles with universities, with other towns, et cetera, and local businesses. So there's a big competition for talent. We've fortunately been able to get some good people in these positions, but we need to do a better job of that. Next is a topic that's probably near and dear to many of your hearts, which is environmental sustainability. It's clear to me that there are many things that Natick has undertaken and is commenced. For example, naming a sustainability coordinator and now director is a key step forward. And we did it, I think, earlier than in many towns. There's a lot of things that we do that can help residents, such as the electrical aggregation. That's not only available to the town and the schools, but it's also available to all residents. And one of the things we're seeing is an increasing proportion of green energy generation. The other piece is to work with the town administration to ensure all the regulations are adhered to, EPA regulations for water quality, for stormwater runoff, for a variety of different things. The last piece is, and I do want to speak with you all about some of the ongoing activities. I'm aware of some of them, but I'm at a surface knowledge for others, and I'd like to find out more about it. The last piece is on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that's really a two-part thing. I need to encourage, as a select board member, need to encourage the efforts of the town administration to have a workforce that mirrors the population of Natick. So they're hiring a chief diversity officer, maybe getting the title wrong, but to shepherd that through so that it becomes institutionalized. The other piece is the townwide efforts to make it more inclusive for members of the public to participate in town governance via committees and town meeting. And I'm encouraged, actually, I've heard many of you say, well, I'm running for town meeting. And I think that's great. That is where a lot of decisions get made that affect our daily lives. And the more people we get from more diverse backgrounds, the better the end product is, in my estimation. So I'll stop here and I'll let you get in a few questions so that I can answer your questions. Thank you.
It's an amazingly full list that you went through. Who's got a question that they'd like to pose to Bruce at this point? I don't see anybody's hand up yet. Maybe I see Brian raising your hand there. Just take yourself off mute. Great. Oh, no, you toggled back on. There you go.
There we go. As far as the environmental work, what do you think of trying to take some sort of halfway drastic measures, such as having the town cut back on salt use and trying to get people not to be using fertilizer?
Yeah, I think there are a number of things. I think, first of all, personally, I've cut back dramatically on fertilizer use, so I see the value in it. A couple things that are happening in the town. There actually is an EPA stormwater runoff permit that the DPW has to adhere to. If it's not this year, it's starting next year. But they have to do more investments to prevent phosphorus runoff, which is obviously the runoff from fertilizer and other things. I think that's one aspect of it. Another aspect of it in town government is the land facilities, natural resources people, the people that take care of the fields and so forth. They're cutting back on their usage of fertilizers. And that's also a plus. I think part of the problem too is an outreach problem, or it's not really a problem, it's an outreach opportunity where people need to be educated that more isn't better, that there are some, I'll call it, what's the right word, non-traditional fertilizing alternatives that don't lead to runoff and don't lead to, you know, things like algae and waterway and that kind of stuff. So I think there's also, I read in the open space plan that they're one of the things they're trying to do is develop a list of those types of things. And, you know, that's again, getting back to the education piece and online, if there were a section on the town website, for example, that says, you know, here's how you know, it's in your spring tax bill, maybe, and it says, did you know, here's ways to organically feed your lawn, etc. I think they're constantly looking at ways, the town, to figure out ways to lessen the impact on water pollution. I shouldn't say pollution, it's water quality.
Thank you. Another quick question. Do you support the Community Preservation Act?
In principle, yes, I do. I need to learn as much about it as possible. I think it's an avenue to get a lot of things done in the town, such as getting open space and preserving open space, help with affordable housing. I think we do a terrible job with respect to developing funds to help with affordable housing. The Affordable Housing Trust does the best they can with the money that they have. But I think there's a widening gap in town between what people can afford to live, and there needs to be a little bit more of the balance to doing that.
Thank you.
Bruce, I've got a question. Before you ran through your long list, I think you said one of your qualifications or the things that you thought made you a good candidate was your collaborative skills. I was wondering if there was any anecdotes of kind of, you know, work that you've done that highlights that skill for us that you'd want to share.
I can, first of all, my background, I didn't go into too much. I was in the technology business in project management and product management. And that's the ultimate collaborative environment where you, so I knocked off my video, I'm sorry. I don't know how I did that. I think collaboration skills are important to the select board or any multi-member body. My background has been in, you know, working across organizational boundaries and figuring out, all right, where's the common ground? How do we get things done? You know, we may not have the exact same objectives, but how do we get there? And I think that's also true of town government. I think my experience on the finance committee, which is a 15-member board or committee with disparate views. It's kind of a microcosm of town meeting. You know, very different views about how to get from point A to point B, and you have to reconcile them. And there have been times where I have thought I would, going into a meeting, I'd read up on the issues and think, okay, I'm going to vote this way. And then somebody would come to the meeting and present a view that I had not considered, and I thought, oh, wait a minute, you know, maybe that's the best way to go. So I think that is part of being a good collaborator is being a willing listener. And another good example is a recent example when we talked about one of the things in the town charter is the town administrator has to deliver a budget by January 1st. Well, in reality, from the finance committee perspective and from the town government point of view, that's kind of a work of fiction. And by that, I mean, a lot of things are unknown at that time. We don't know what state aid is going to be. We don't know what insurance premiums are going to look like. We don't know excise tax. We don't know what school aid is going to be. So a lot of different things aren't known at the time. So the initial request was from the town administrator was, what if we bumped it to March 1st? And so we considered that as a finance committee, and we ultimately said, you know what, the problem with that is that gives us approximately, I'm doing this off the top of my head, about maybe 7 or 8 weeks to go through all the warrant articles. So it's not just the budget, it's the warrant articles and everything else associated with it. Excuse me. So we, at town meeting, on the fly, sort of just said, well, what about, and the town administrator went to town meeting and said, you know, we'd like the March 1st date. And on the town meeting floor, we submitted a counteroffer, which was, how about we split the difference, which is February 1st. So now town meeting agreed to that, said, all right, that gives enough time for the finance committee to do its thing. And it gives the town administration and school administration another month of data to figure out what a budget is looking like. And I think they just put out the budget, and it's a lot closer to what the final budget will look like. So instead of the finance committee spinning its wheels and then just saying, okay, we can't vote for this, we got to wait for the real numbers. Right? That's just a waste of everybody's time. So that's probably a good example.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I remember that discussion at the last town meeting. Bill, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question. You mentioned environmental issues, and specifically you mentioned electrical aggregation. I know the town and the school board both do their own aggregation contracts separately. So my question is one of where you have conflicting priorities, where you're concerned about financial security, stability, you're on the finance team, finance committee, and if the town were to go to 100% electric, which I think is a good idea, it's going to cost money. So my question is, how do you evaluate those conflicting priorities that you have about sustainability versus environmental protection and dealing with climate change at the local level?
That's an excellent question. Let me just say one thing as far as the electric aggregation program. One of the things that happened while I was on the finance committee was that previously there were separate contracts for electric for the schools and the town administration or the town municipal government. And through the creation of the facilities management department, they merged those. Once those contracts were on the verge of expiring, they consolidated them into one contract. So that gives the town more purchasing power relative to people. You raised your second point on the 100% green energy is a complicated issue, and I understand the ultimate goal is electrification without using fossil fuels. I think ultimately we need to get there, and we need to get there sooner rather than later. I think that it's not just on Natick to solve that problem. I think it's part of the issue is going to be solved by the state to provide incentives to do that. You're starting to see, as an example, we have a natural gas heating system that's probably on its last legs, and we're looking to replace it with a heat pump system. So and there's incentives from the state to go all electric. So I think it's those types of things that say, let's help the municipalities convert to all electric, or as much electric or solar or renewable energy, we should just call it, as possible. And I think that's it's partly on the municipalities and it's partly on the state. And I think together we can drive towards that. The state, honestly, why would the state say we've got to get provide strong financial incentives for people to go with, let's say, a heat pump to replace an oil heater or an oil furnace? The reason is they have to get to their carbon neutrality goals. And the only way they can get to their carbon neutrality goals is to shift a lot of households to being not be dependent on fossil fuels, right? So I think it's a two-part solution. I think encouragement is the only way that it's going to happen. The question is, how much will it cost? I think there are people, if you have the means to be able to do that, there are more people who are wanting to say, yeah, I'd like to go 100%. And there are others who say, I can barely afford to pay what I do now. So you kind of have to have a balance that says, eventually we'll get there to 100%, but it's going to take incremental steps.
Thanks for that. Pat, I think you had your hand up next. You got to come off mute. All right. There you go.
I think Jay was ahead of me. He wanted to speak, but
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm willing to speak now, but I think Jay was trying to get your attention.
Yeah.
I don't know where he went.
Yeah, he's off video right now. Why don't you go ahead? And then he'll,
I was going to ask Bruce, getting back to the affordability issue. I know that Jay and other people worked hard on this over the years too. And I recall about 3 years ago, Jay had introduced what I thought was a fairly mild proposal warrant to increase a small fee on properties that were sold over, I don't know, $750,000. And I guess that I don't think that got off the town meeting floor. And I was wondering if that's number one. Number two is there was an outstanding proposal for a veterans housing over here at the Henry Wilson, just behind the Henry Wilson cobbler shack. And I don't know where that is right now. It seemed to me like a really good idea, but there were some territorial things between recreation land and municipal land. So just going to ask you about those two things, where you might stand on that. Or
I think your memory is correct on the CPA proposal that town meeting did not go for. And from what I've read of their current proposal, I think it is a much more nuanced proposal that it helps lower income, I'll just say people with limited means to not have to pay the so it's 1% on top of your tax bill. So below a certain amount, that 1% surcharge is not added to your tax bill, and above a certain amount, it's a 1% that tax bill. So I think that addresses the affordability for people who cannot afford an increase in taxes. It gives them a little headroom there. I think that people are recognizing, at least I hope so, within town, that Natick is getting priced out of the reach of many people. You know, if we continue down this track, there will be a number of people who literally can't afford to stay in Natick. One of our neighbors, for example, was an empty nester, and she wanted to downsize to a place in Natick. And for what she could sell her single family home, to find something, and she could not find something in Natick, even when she was selling her single family home, which is, you know, 2 blocks, 3 blocks from downtown. She still could not find something in Natick and ended up moving to Ashland, I believe. So we need to do something. I think people are gaining an appreciation that we need to do something as a town to make to have housing options for a lot of different people at a lot of different price points. So there's some incentives from the state again that are coming down as far as walkability to public transportation. So somebody who doesn't have, you know, maybe they have one car, you know, that they share among several people in the household, to be able to go to the grocery store, for example. So there's incentives to have those near the the MBTA stations or any local transportation, quite honestly. The second piece I've been rattling on for quite some time. Can you refresh my memory on your second question?
Oh, the veterans housing that was proposed over here
Yes.
on the Henry Wilson by the Cat Cobbler Shack. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that is a complex issue, as you might expect. In principle, I think it's a great idea. I think that it one of the areas that we sorely need in town is veterans housing. I thought the proposal was good. I think the issue came down to the there's conservation land in the back of that property that there were some issues related to that. But, and there were also some objections to increasing the density in an already dense area. In my opinion, and during the Finance Committee hearings, I was fully supportive of it. I still am supportive of the concept. And I think we do need, as a town, to address those issues. I think one of the things that Paul could probably correct me if I'm wrong on this, there are very few veterans housing options in the Metro West area. And I think it would be a really good thing for Natick to do this.
Thank you.
Yeah. Polly, do you want to weigh in on that as well?
Yes, I would. Bruce, you are 100% right. I've said this all along. From Worcester to Boston, there's no veterans housing. So yeah, so Natick being right in the middle would be a perfect spot. And Jay and Ricky Ball have been instrumental in trying to get this through, along with veteran Billy Verner and Natick. So those folks have been doing a lot of legwork on that project, and I take my hat off to those folks, and thank you, Bruce.
Thanks, Polly. Brian, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, my comment is with the CPA and taxes that you get what you pay for. I've been here for 30 years and we don't have children. And the large part of our taxes goes to the school system. And we're okay with that. And we like Natick. We think it's a place worth investing in. And if you look at the CPA, I believe that it was like $20 on the average per quarter that your taxes would raise. $20 is, you know, a bottle of wine, or you know, it's inconsequential from my point of view, and the benefits that the community would receive to it is tremendous. And for people to get their head around this, you know, the small amount that you got to pitch in, which is, to me, is pretty inconsequential, you know, in our day-to-day expenses of life. And if we could just, by adding $20 per quarter, it's like, what? Why not? You know, this is just seems to me like a great investment to make. So, you know, taxes, I can live with them as long as I'm getting something out of them, you know, and I think there'd be a ton of benefit from the CPA. So thank you.
Well, let me just follow up on your points. I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's the way to sell this, because if you talk about percentages, people say, you know, most people have in their head, all right, Prop 2.5, my taxes can only go up a maximum of 2.5%. Okay, I got that in my head. When you hear 1% on top of that, people's perception, and it's not the correct perception, but their perception is, God, now it's 3.5%. Well, that's not true. It's 1% on your tax bill, right? So it's 1% of a fairly small number. So we just have to, the messaging has to be, it's 1% of your tax bill that's already been calculated. It's not 1% of what you owe. So it is, I think the proponents of the CPA have understood why town meeting has not approved it in the past. And I think the current instantiation of it is a lot more nuanced and a lot better packaging for people to understand.
Thanks for that, both Brian and Bruce. I see in Martin and Cindy and Rick all with their hands up. So, oh, and Ricky as well. While we start with Martin and.
Yes, so thank you for that last remark. The Open Space Committee certainly supports the CPA as the Historical Commission and the Affordable Housing Trust. But in terms of open space, there's other roles the Select Board has, and it's kind of become a more important body in recent years. A little bit of the history, I think you know it, but just for other people, there was a conservation fund that was managed by the Conservation Commission, and that was restructured. It's now called the FAR Bonus Stabilization Fund, which is a mouthful, and that's controlled by town meeting with advice from the FinCom, as you know, and the Select Board. And that money was used for Pegan Hill and for the rail trail. But of course, it's a limited amount of money. And the Select Board is important in trying to allocate that money, but it's also, the Select Board also has done some other things in the last few years. They've done negotiations on 22 Pleasant Street, and they've done some negotiations on Winona Farm, and neither of those worked out as far as the town acquiring property. And they've also just made a decision on 82 Rockland Street, whether the town would exercise its right of refusal. That's called a Chapter 61A land, which means the town had a right to that. So that's now being proposed as a cluster development. So anyway, a long-winded introduction to the question of how do you prioritize when there's a lot of open space parcels that we would like to protect in some way, but there's a very limited amount of money, and how do you figure out, as a Select Board member, which ones you're going to prioritize?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that as you said, there's a finite amount of money, and there's always way too many things that are essential to spend it on. But I think you have to, as a Select Board member, weigh the opportunity costs. As the example of the I'll take the two examples, Pegan Hill and 22 Pleasant Street. In the case of Pegan Hill, this was a great opportunity for the town to acquire that open space and the rights to use it as a trail. And the first time I walked up there and saw the view of, I think it was Wachusett Mountain, I thought, wow, I've never been down here before. This is amazing. I'm so glad that the town is considering doing this. I contrast that with 22 Pleasant Street, where on the surface, it seemed this is a really good idea. We can acquire property that is adjoining the Charles River. But the downside and the reason the town had to walk away from it was the environmental contamination under that building. The town would have assumed sole responsibility for cleaning that up, and it became that coupled with the price tag that the previous owners had put together just made it too costly for the town at that time. Now, in the future, should something come available that where there is a good opportunity, I think that the town should consider it. There are some possibilities on the horizon, nothing concrete that I know of at this point, but I'm of an open mind to figure out, well, is this something that we can acquire at a reasonable price that is of benefit to a majority of the population?
Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Ricky, why don't we jump to you and then I'll come back up to Cindy. Did you have a question?
Would you believe my 85 years or so? Can't remember what I was gonna ask.
Well, we can swing her back around if that's okay.
Yeah,
Sorry to
it'll
make you
come
wait.
to me. My computer is slow, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Cindy, why don't we go to you then?
Oh, I know. I
Oh,
know.
you remembered. Okay, great.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say that in terms of the CPA, that 1% is really an investment. Last year, the return on that investment was 43% from the state. That was the matching amount that the state gave to CPA community, depending on the percentage, that they had. So that there's money on the table that we've left there for many years because we didn't tax it the first time. And I don't know where you could get a better return on investment than that. So I just wanted to point that out. It's not that percentage every year. It varies. But with federal money coming down the pipe eventually, the chances of our getting a really good return on our CPA percentage are very good.
Thank you, Ricky.
The other thing, as far as the veterans housing, the sticking point there was finding matching land to swap for the conservation land that exists behind the copper shop. And so far, they've not been able to come up with equally valuable and accessible land. There was some negotiation trying to go on with the auto dealer who owned the land on the other side of Mill Street, that's on Central Street.
It's pretty hard to pick up some of what you're saying, Ricky. Bruce, did you have any response to anything?
I think I got the gist of it, and Ricky is right. It was the issue was Article 97, and they had to find comparable, I'll call it comparable parcel that could be put in under the control of the Conservation Commission. So the rule with Article 97 is when you take it out, you got to put in a equal or better location of the same basic size. And so you'd need to find something in West Natick that's suitable. Now, at the present time, I think I heard Ricky talking about an potential with the auto dealership, and I think what I'm thinking of is the former, I don't even remember who it was anymore, but right by Roche Brothers. She's talking about that property, and certainly that could be considered as a great location, honestly, because if it's veterans housing, they just walk across the street. There's a drugstore and a grocery store right across the street. Get a crosswalk there. It would be perfect in my mind. Don't need to have a car. Public transportation that you can pick up at the where Roche Brothers is, as well as you could walk to the train from there. I think it would be ideal.
Yeah. And each location has pluses and minuses. So I just want to be mindful of the time. We could certainly go past 10, but we do try to wrap the main part of it up around then. And I'm seeing still Cindy and Rick. I know Deb has a couple of questions in the chat. I love Sarah's got a question, but let me get to Cindy first because she's been waiting patiently. Cindy.
Actually, it's just really quick. It's more really for Polly to have a better understanding of what veterans housing is. You said between Worcester, I guess there's something in Worcester and something in Boston, but is it really just a cluster development that's for veterans? Is that the basics?
Well, I think what they're proposing in Natick is a little different than the housing in Boston. The housing in Boston is more dormitory type of housing. The housing in Worcester involves both dorm, shelter, and some housing, such as Natick's proposing. The biggest parcels of housing that Natick is proposing fall in Fort Devens, Mass, and up in the Haverhill area. So there isn't any between Boston and Worcester. And Boston is mostly single apartments throughout the city and in a large housing dorm building at Court Street. So yeah, so Natick will be unique in the fact that I think Natick's housing, if developed, would be more of the type such as Cedar Gardens type of apartments where they could be 1-2 bedroom apartments. I think are being proposed right now, and there are toughest thing is is the location and and to find the location perfect in Natick. And you're not gonna find a location in Natick to please everybody in Natick. I can tell you that right now. And you're not gonna find a location in Natick right now donation wise. We do have veterans land in Natick, and we have state land in Natick, and we have town. So I mean, it's tough. It's tough.
So essentially, we're talking a cluster development, a cluster housing development. Is that's for veterans? That was really my question.
It would not be single family housing. It would be multi.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
That's what I was trying to say, Cindy. It would be more of an apartment type, 1-2 bedroom. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Polly.
Thanks for those clarifications. Rick, you've been waiting patiently as well.
Yes, thanks. This is quick. I wanted to give you some feedback and then offer to follow up with Carol if we can share a contact. I was hoping that somebody would frame the question that Bill did as I was trying to frame it. And this is Bill Ramage early on about balancing. I just want to tell you that you lost my vote in the answer there. And I support you on your affordability and your transparency for sure. And definitely town services and diversity, equity issues and open space. But I can no longer support you for those things that I value highly, because I don't support you on the sustainability answer. So I'm speaking for myself. I don't know about others, but I'll be running for town meeting from precinct 8. And I would love to follow up with Carol and explain offline why I can't support that. And it's mainly the sort of waiting for the state aspect of this. I just don't think we can do that anymore. If we wait for the state, we saw it yesterday in the news. They're going to kick wind, solar down the road 2 years, waiting. And that might not happen still, could be rescued, but we can't wait for the federal government and we can't wait for the state government. Other towns are going ahead. This attracted me to Natick 4 years ago from Needham, and I'd be very disappointed if we just continue this sort of business as usual, wait and see. Thank you.
May I respond to that?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay. Rick, I would say that I perhaps misspoke when I talked about left you with the impression that we should be waiting for assistance from the state. My point in saying that is we can only get so far by ourselves. We can do a lot of things locally. I've supported every green initiative that has been put forth by the sustainability director. I've talked to her about other projects that are in the pipeline, such as replacement and retrofitting of systems that are based on fossil fuels, and doing that over time. So I'm 100% behind acting locally and acting now, but I'm also mindful of pushing the state to, hey, step up here. We can't do it completely without your help. So if I left you with the impression that it's we can wait, I could not be more opposed to that position. I would say that this is very high on my priority list to see how far we can get on our own.
Well,
Thank you.
Yeah, let me just say quickly that language is important, and I will tell Carol exactly what you said from quotes that I would suggest you no longer say, because what I heard there, I'm glad to hear you say you misspoke. So I'll be, quick and specific with Carol about what you shouldn't be saying. If I were running against you, that's what I would run against. I'm not. I hope to support you. Okay, you're a bright guy and you're committed, and it's great that you're here, and thank you.
I appreciate the feedback and your clarification, Bruce, and particularly that invitation for maybe Rick and Carol to have a follow-up, but along with Bruce. Honestly, it sounds like something that could benefit everyone by some clarification.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Can I jump in just because it kind of follows with what Rick was saying?
Sure, quickly. Yeah.
So I just, I want to, just kind of, I was going to ask Bruce, actually falls along the lines, kind of make a pledge if you are elected as a select board member. With Pat Conaway's help back in November 2017, he was showing a movie at the Common Street Spiritual Center. I asked him if I could stand up and make a little pitch after the movie to do something about climate change. I made a little talk, passed around a sheet of paper. We got 32 people who expressed an interest in it. That was the nucleus for Renewable Natick. And we did, in 8 short months from our kickoff meeting, a Herculean effort, we got a resolution drafted. In a town meeting in fall of 2018, we got 98 out of 102 town meeting members, I believe, to pass the resolution to get to 100% renewable energy by 2050. And then just 2 years after that, we realized 2050 is way too far off. We've got to do something more. I got appointed to the Sustainability Committee, and we started working on a plan to try and get there to 2050. There's 2 different mandates the state has to increase the amount of renewable energy. So we got the resolution passed, and with Ricky Ball's help we got Jillian's position elevated to director, which allowed her, as they say, a position at the big table with the big boys. So it's not enough just to say that we need to do something. I think right now the select board is sort of teetering on maybe adopting this goal of 2030, but if we don't do something about the environment now, it's going to be too late. We have to take action now. So I want to get a pledge from you, if you are appointed to the board and voted, that you do everything you can to reach that goal.
I can wholeheartedly pledge that I will work to achieve that goal. There's no question in my mind that the time is now. If we don't do things now, we're never going to get to the goals. We need to hold ourselves accountable as a town to reach the milestones along the way. And one of the things that I've done is I've reached out to Leo Ryan to find out more about the progress that's going on. It's one thing when you have a finance committee view of the thing and you think, okay, here, I've seen the slides, I understand the objective, but I don't know what the measurable results are to date. And I need to find that out. But I think undoubtedly, wholeheartedly, and enthusiastically back the efforts of sustainability.
Just one final point on the thing. I know a bunch of us colleagues, Bill Ramage and many others here, helped to get just residents to adopt 100% renewable energy. And it just seems just out of place that we can't get the town itself and their municipal buildings to reach that same threshold. Yes, it's a little bit more money. We've got to kind of balance between the money that we have and what our future needs are. But it really would set, I think, a great precedent to other residents if the town itself was getting all of its energy from 100% class 1 renewable.
Now, what I would like to do is, if I'm elected, is find out what the cost delta is. And if it's not, I would say it would have to be quite substantial for me not to say, well, to ask the question, well, why can't we just push ahead on 100% for the reasons you just cited? It's the classic, and you got to walk the walk. If you're going to talk the talk. So.
Right. So we are at the top of the hour, and just to change gears a little bit, Deb had put a couple of questions in the chat on a couple of different threads. One of them, Bruce, if you see any significant policies related to COVID-19 occurring in 2022. I know that's hard to do given that the picture changes pretty much every hour. But then she also had questions about maybe amplifying a little bit on your thoughts about the diversity committee and whether there should be a person of color on it. I'm not sure if I'm reading that correctly. But Deb, I should invite you to amplify those questions if you'd like to. I'm seeing you.
Yeah, did she drop off?
She might have had to drop off.
Yeah.
She's got a full schedule here.
Yeah.
But, I know you're also scheduled to speak to her group next month, Native for Black Lives Matter. So
let me answer her second question first on the DEI committee. Yes, I think we learn from people who are not like ourselves, right? If you're looking for diversity, equity, and inclusion, then it can't be all the people from one particular group, right? It has to be people who understand the issues and understand, have a good idea of how they can be ameliorated, worked on, figure out the right words, but you have to have representation on that committee of someone who can represent the position that you're trying to get an understanding of. You can sit in a room and think, okay, I know what the issues are. We've got to do A, B, and C. But until you get the perspective of somebody who's living in the middle of something like that, you can't really appreciate the perspective. I was thinking actually this morning of there was an issue. I don't even remember the exact issue, but I thought, I've never, I'm not a parent, but I have friends who have had to have what they call the talk with their kids to say, if you get stopped by the police, here's how you should behave. I've never had to caution a child to say, be really careful out there and come back safe. I've never had to do those things, right? So how can I possibly understand that? You've got to get the people who are right in the middle of it to understand that. Regarding her first question on COVID, I'm relying on the Board of Health to make those decisions. They're the experts. They're getting the most up-to-date information from the authorities, public health, and I respect their thoughts on this. Everybody is sick of masks. I mean, we're absolutely tired of wearing masks everywhere. But the reality is, this with the Omicron variant going down a little, there's a possibility that we can return to some semblance of normalcy, right? And it's kind of at, all right, we're at the 11th hour. Let's not reverse ourselves and do something dopey and be right back at square one, right? So I would say, stay the course, hang on. I know it's tough, but believe me, I coach basketball, and I went from my car to the gym, and of course I didn't have my mask in my hand, and I went, damn it, I gotta go back for my mask. And so I go trudge back to my car, and it was that icy morning, and I'm thinking, like, this will be my luck. I'm gonna fall, knock myself out, try and get my mask. So I just, it's people are tired. It's natural to have fatigue. This is 2 years. I mean, it's just really hard. And I know that there are many parents who are worried about their kids and the impact of that. I was thinking the other week about kids who started in kindergarten when there was a mask mandate in place. So they've never not had a mask going to school. I just try to think about that, what sort of effect that might have on them. And I think the school administration is rightly pointing out that there's going to be some significant issues. They're already seeing them, and they're already taking action to work through them.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate your answer of saying relying on the Board of Public Health and our educators. I mean, we've got a lot of expertise among us. We may have our own opinions, but let's use that expertise as well. It is after 10. Sarah, I know you had a question or a comment.
Carol's got a comment.
And
Yeah, my question dates all the way, or goes all the way back to 22 Pleasant Street. This was the field I worked in my whole career, of the hazardous waste site issues, and obviously I was not involved in that particular negotiation, but just more of a comment than a question. There are ways, if in the future the town is interested in a piece of property that has environmental contamination, that is not categorically a deal breaker. There are ways that property transactions can be structured to protect the buyer. So I just want to throw that out there as a general comment that, the buying and selling of property didn't stop when people discovered that there was contamination in the world. And I know that sounds really simplistic, but there are, I was a licensed site professional for 25 years until I retired, and there are ways to structure the deal. So I just throw that out there, Bruce, as a comment to for future negotiations.
Thank you for that. That's a helpful knowledge for me to have.
Yeah, Carol, if you want to just go off mute there.
Yeah, thank you. All I wanted to do was say, I'll let Bruce thank everybody, but I did put the website in the chat. It is brucefernadic.org, but it's in the chat. And I also put my email address because I thought that would be a good way for Rick and I to get in touch. But again, if anybody else wants to get in touch with me, feel free to use that. And it's pretty easy. It's CAGLOFF, GLOFF @comcast.net. But I'm not the candidate, Bruce is, but happy to take any messages or take advice or whatever. So thank you.
Thank you for that. And yeah, Bruce, if you have any closing thoughts, and Ricky, I guess I saw your hand up as well too.
Yeah, it just occurred to me, Jay's question, he had to leave for a doctor's appointment, so, but his question was, I don't know if I'm paraphrasing it well, but if you had an issue where the popular opinion was of one, the popular opinion leaned in one direction, but you felt that the direction that the town should go in was a different one from the popular one. That would be a decision that you would have to make as to whether or not to follow to represent constituents or to lead on an issue. How would you, what is your inclination in that kind of circumstance?
Sure, okay. My inclination is to lead. And the way you lead is you go with, you get to gather the information that's needed to make a decision and make an informed decision. And you try to urge others to move in that direction. Whether it's popular or not is irrelevant, in my opinion. If it's the right thing to do, then it's the right thing to do for the majority of town. I'm not in this race, and I think I'm not in this race to win a popularity contest, right? That's not what I'm about. And I want to make sure that we're making sound decisions that are fact-based. I can definitely say with certainty, there will be times where public opinion may be skewed in a particular direction that may not be in the best interest of the town. And I am not afraid to stick my neck out and say, no, this is not the right way to go, and here are the reasons why I believe it. Now, people may not agree with me, and that's their prerogative. That's okay. But ultimately, I have to be able to look myself in the mirror and say, you know, I looked at all the information that I had available, and in my opinion, this is the direction to go. And there are 4 other people on the select board, and at least 3 of them or 2 of them have to agree with that position, right? So that again goes back to the collaboration thing that I was talking about earlier. You don't do things as an individual per se, you do things as a board.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. That was a really good answer. And thanks again for joining us. Thank you, everyone else on the call, for asking the questions. I think it's been a good discussion. I want to remind people that thanks to Martin, we now have all of our discussions recorded, and it'll be up on our YouTube channel shortly. I'll remind Deb of that, since she didn't get a chance to still be on the call when Bruce addressed her questions. But again, I'd like to thank everybody. I know there are a small subset of us that are going to stay on this particular session at the end, just to talk about future speakers that we might be trying to line up. So unless anybody's got any other closing thoughts.
I just have
yeah.
a quick comment.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you for setting this all up. These were great questions. They made me think about what was important or is important. And it's always good to get different perspectives. That's what I'm always seeking to do. And I hope I've convinced you that I am the right person for the select board and that you'll vote for me. So thank you again for setting this up.
Great. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
All right.